Hey there, everybody. This is Rick with TaxDome, and welcome to our series of workflow-centered webinars. We're very excited to share this three-part series with you, which will go over everything you need to know about workflows, ranging from things you should do before even logging into TaxDome, all the way to the most advanced functions. Today, we'll focus primarily on making you understand what workflows are, how they will benefit you, and how you should get started. You're also going to hear some great insights from our consultants throughout the entire webinar series. So let's take a look at today's agenda. First up, we need to understand how your work is currently handled and what the common issues that we see actually are. We'll then talk about the solutions that TaxDome offers. We'll follow this up by giving you a small demonstration of how the workflow functions once they're actually set up. Following this, we'll help you understand TaxDome's terminology. Then we need to start planning your process and break it down into the individual steps. Finally, we will build an outline or a skeleton of your process in TaxDome. This first part of this series is important for you to learn the value of the feature and exactly what it's for. But the next two parts are going to be much more hands-on. Now, let's go ahead and get into today's topics. We'll start right here by elaborating on what workflows actually are. Your workflow refers to the process your firm follows when working on the services that you're providing. So everything from the very start, which might begin with a client reaching out, asking you to do work for them, and then everything in between that moment and you completing the actual work as well as getting paid. Now, what do you think are the issues you face with your current processes? That's a question you have to ask yourself before you can actually start making any improvements. Everybody's processes are unique to their own firms, but there are some common issues that everybody struggles with no matter who you are. So let's say you struggle with keeping track of all the work that you actually have to do. If you have a lot of clients, chances are you will be overwhelmed by having to deal with all of them all at the same time. You need to find their documents. You need to know what has been done and what needs to be done next. You need to communicate with the clients, manage your team, check their progress, and the list goes on and on and on. Now, some firms have started using some tools to help them manage their load, but many are still using something like Excel spreadsheets, or worst case, physical documents and file folders. Now, if you're among those who are struggling with everything, then just think about how much time you are actively wasting simply looking for information. If you include the time the rest of your team wastes on the very same thing, well, you're likely reaching dozens of hours each week that could have been spent better. Besides the time factor, you're also running into the issue of potentially missing some work that you had to do. It's not at all uncommon for tasks to fall through the cracks when your organization is lacking. And to be frank, if you're still using traditional methods of organizing your office, well, then the chances of that happening are much higher than they would be otherwise. At this point, those are two crucial factors which directly affect your firm's ability to generate revenue: mismanaging your time and potentially not completing your work due to organizational problems. Let's take a second to hear what some of our certified consultants would say are the biggest issues firms commonly face.
Hi, I'm Carlos Garcia, and I'm the founder of ExceedSales, and I am also a TaxDome workflow consultant.
Hi, I'm Jamie Gruol, and I'm the co-founder of Workflows for Tax Pros, and we help small practices implement TaxDome with ease. Our proven methods have helped over 700 practices, and we're so excited to share with you our ideas on how implementing TaxDome is going to transform the work you do.
I think most of it is they're really frustrated about having so many different tech stacks. Like they have a spreadsheet for this, they have a system for that. They are communicating all via email. So I think like they are. What I find happens a lot is when a firm is starting to they start up, they don't have a process, so they kind of just follow the most whatever works for them at the moment, which could be just email. And then when they realize, oh my gosh, I'm getting more clients and I'm getting busier, I need to find a way to be more efficient. They try to create a new process. And then once they hire another person, they try to create another process, or so they start signing up for all these different apps. And all of a sudden they have, before they know it, as they get busier and busier, they have 3, 4 apps that they're paying for. And all of it is like a Frankenstein version of a process, but it's a lot of things that started midway, but then needed to change. So I think once they realize that there's something that you can combine all of these things and replace the one app that replaces all or most of them, I think that's when they come to the realization, I think I really need to step into something that's going to be simpler.
When we have our clients come to us and they have no systems, specifically technology like practice management tools in place, we find that they're very overwhelmed. They're burning out. They're ready to just throw it all out. They are exhausted because they're spending so much time and energy trying to follow up with their clients, trying to gather documents from their clients. And this is unnecessary effort because we have amazing tools available to us now that we haven't had in the past. And so making the transition over to automated operations is often what they're coming to us for. And the biggest problem with not using a practice management tool is that you're really doing unnecessary work. As one of our clients recently said, he says, I came to you because I wanted to learn how to work smarter, not harder.
All right, everyone, let's talk about how TaxDome solves the aforementioned workflow problems. There are 3 points that we should focus on: personalization, organization, and automation. TaxDome's workflows are completely tailored to your personal needs. We understand how everybody's processes are unique, since there is no one-size-fits-all type of approach when it comes to this industry, and you all know that. But despite that, we also understand that some aspects of the most common processes are going to be consistently needed. Therefore, to make matters optimal for everybody, we made sure every part of your workflow is completely customizable inside of TaxDome, but also made editable templates available for you. This means you don't have to fundamentally change your approach to your work. That's not our goal here. We want to make sure you can do your work however you want to do it, but in a more optimized and organized way. So, what about the organization? Now, I explained earlier how difficult it is to keep track of everything when you use traditional methods. TaxDome will keep separate entries for all the clients you're doing work for, with all their relevant details listed right within those same entries. Let's say that you want your team to have access to some documents you and the client have uploaded. You can link them to their entry in your workflow, and everyone will see it right there without needing to go into the client's profile or visit several different pages. Everything is going to be in one place. On top of that, you're also going to have multiple tools like the Kanban style view and filters to help you see where in your process every client is. We won't overwhelm you by going over every single function at once, so don't worry. We'll take everything step by step to make sure that everybody understands the functions and can follow along. Now, there was also the third point I wanted us to cover, the automation. Now, stop for a second and think how many different steps in your process you're doing manually. Reaching out to clients about various things or notifying them of your progress, sending them forms to fill out, or even just assigning new tasks to your team. Those are just a couple examples, but I'm sure once you go over your entire process, you will see many more repetitive steps you regularly spend time on. TaxDome's automation functionality lets you save yourself that time. You'll be able to set up automations using your own templates to do a ton of stuff automatically for you. Those will then be used whenever your clients reach certain steps in your process. Now, this is something we'll focus on more in the next session because we need to make sure you understand the core ideas and structure first. For now, let's hear from our consultants again and see what they have to say about the experience switching to TaxDome's workflows.
Yeah, I think first of all, it's helping firms elevate the customer experience that they provide to their customers by being able to give their customers a portal in which they can sign up to their mobile app and upload a document, sign a proposal, pay an invoice, e-sign a document, or any of those things. I think is a huge benefit, and it sort of elevates the brand value of the portal. Having the white label portal, I think, is huge. Nowadays, everybody does a lot more work on their smartphones. So I think that's one of the biggest ones. But I think the second one is their ability to not have to worry about when a client does something like uploads a document or pays a bill or signs an invoice, that the next step in that process is already automated. And so what a lot of the things that I get my clients telling me after we do the implementation is, I'm so happy that I'm sitting here on the beach drinking a Mai Tai, and then all I get to see on my phone is notifications of the process working by itself, right? It's like a mini assistant that I just hired to do all these things for me without me having to call the office and check in on things, because the automations have taken care of all of that.
So the benefit of working with a tool like TaxDome is that it automates the administrative efforts that you're pouring so much of your precious time into. And TaxDome itself is amazing because it allows you to automate the things you've always wanted to do, like an excellent client experience where your clients are getting status updates, communications about what you're expecting of them at the time you're expecting it of them. And we have found that the transition to a tool like TaxDome is a little outside of the box for a lot of the tax professionals and accountants and bookkeepers we've worked with. And this is okay, but there is a learning curve to it. And so when you're moving to a tool like TaxDome, you need to be thinking about what my long-term vision is. And I can guarantee you that's not you doing a lot of administrative effort. You want to be focusing on your clients. And so TaxDome allows you to do that by leveraging the automation and features of the TaxDome tool. And so this eliminates all of that administrative effort and the hours and hours of time you're spending right now just trying to keep organized and stay on top of your work. So implementing TaxDome will transform the way you're working, and all of that burnout, exhausted feeling you have is going to be eliminated thanks to the automations of TaxDome.
All right, everybody, we're going to talk about your first steps very soon. But first, I want to give you a small demonstration of an already set up process so you can visualize your goal better. We won't spend too much time on this, and you don't need to worry if you don't understand everything that you'll see, because we are going to tackle each point bit by bit a little bit later on. So let's start here in the firm portal. Now, I briefly mentioned the Kanban view. This is a board with all the steps your unique processes have. The graphic presentation makes it very easy to understand where your clients are inside of that process. You don't need to check everybody individually to understand that they're at the start, the middle, or at the end of your process. You'll also have as many steps in your process as you need. This one here is just a simple and easy example just to show you some of the basic ideas. It's a small tax preparation process, or as we refer to it in TaxDome, a pipeline. Just keep in mind, you can set up as many processes for different services that you need. You are by no means restricted to just tax return pipelines. The different steps I created are separated into these columns, and you can see their labels at the top. Your clients will appear as these cards once you start your work for them, and as both your team and the client complete their responsibilities, these cards will move through the different steps all the way to the very end when you know it's done. Now, at any point, you can open these entries to see all of the details. Like I mentioned before, you'll also see the linked items, whether they be documents, forms, invoices, messages, or anything else that is relevant. Now, I'm sure you can see how having an organized system like this completely eliminates the hassle of searching for something and also making sure nothing falls through the cracks. Meanwhile, your clients get a very different experience. The workflows are almost entirely for the firm. The client will only receive notifications when they have to do something. For example, they need to sign a proposal. The only other thing they'll see is a status you can set up, which lets them know if you are working on their job, but even that can be disabled if you prefer. Now, again, we won't spend more time looking at this process for now. We want to continue moving on. Instead, we want to start preparing you for your own setup. There are two things that we're going to focus on now: the terminology and breaking down your processes. TaxDome's terminology surrounding the workflows might not be clear or intuitive to everybody, so we prepared this slide with all the key terms and some explanations. I'll, of course, explain them a bit more just to make sure everybody understands. Pipelines are your processes for any services that you provide, whether it's accounting, bookkeeping, payroll, or even something that's not necessarily a service, but a general process you handle, like new client onboarding, as an example. You will add your clients to the pipelines, and they'll go through all of the steps from start to finish. In general, you'll have a unique pipeline for each one of your services. Next, we have stages. Stages are simple, since those are just the steps of your process. Let's use a tax prep example again, like we did before. Intake, preparation, billing, and e-filing would all be separate steps. Therefore, you could consider those your stages, but also you can add any others that you might need. It's entirely up to you. You'll also add your automations to stages, but there's no need to worry about that for right now. We're going to get back to those after the basics are all set up. Now, what about jobs? This is something newcomers occasionally get confused with. By definition, jobs represent the service you're providing a client, but an easier way to look at it is as an entry in your pipeline for that particular client, something to use to keep track of as it progresses through the stages. So just keep in mind that pipelines are the processes and the jobs are what you put into the pipeline. Finally, there are tasks. They're the smallest item in this hierarchy. Tasks are simply your to-dos. Anything from uploading some statements, requesting a signature, reviewing a document, any of that can be marked in as a task. So as an overall summary, your team will complete tasks in order to move jobs through the stages of a pipeline. So we actually have a help article dedicated to these terms. So please make sure to check it out if you need that. Now we can move forward and start your preparation for building your own pipelines. Now for this, you might need some time to break down your existing processes. We're going to talk about optimization at a later point in this webinar series. So for now, just focus on breaking down your process bit by bit. You can write it down in a document. You can put it on a spreadsheet. Whatever way is the most convenient for you, stick with that for now. And to help you understand the best way to go about it, let's hear some advice from our consultants.
Yeah, so I think honestly, my favorite resource that TaxDome has is the help.taxdome.com. The first thing I would recommend always is when I do it in every session is have everybody create a kind of a favorites folder on their toolbar. And in that favorites folder, just save certain resources that you want to go back to. And in that help, there is a link that says getting started or your first week. And I think implementing that is brilliant, because one of the first things that I tell everyone as part of my process implementation is I've created my own little roadmap of how to implement your process, and it's a TaxDome dictionary. So get familiar with the terminology because it can be overwhelming. For example, you have tasks, you have jobs, you have pipelines. And I think people can feel a little overwhelmed. How to understand the difference between accounts and contacts. All of these things are very important. And then the last and most important thing, I spend a lot of time on data, making sure that the client data is imported correctly, because if you don't have the right data, it's going to be really hard to organize your processes. So if you don't identify what services your clients are going to receive from you or what segment they belong inside your business, like a tax for bookkeeping or a payroll or quarterly or annually. All of these things affect, by the way you tag them, how you can customize the way you want to serve your clients. So I think getting just familiar with the terminology, saving that help resource center, and then really getting the data correctly uploaded to the system are going to be the three biggest ones.
So when you move to TaxDome and you start planning out your pipelines, the biggest thing you need to think about is standardization. When people come to us, a lot of them are starting to think at the client level, and they're thinking, well, I have all these clients that are all treated differently. They all have different needs. They all have different situations, and people get stuck in the weeds essentially. And so by thinking of a more general process and standardizing the workflow, and going up to the 5,000-foot level and thinking about how do I perform my tax preparation, for example, that helps you get out of those weeds and start looking at the actual process that you're performing. Now, your clients will fit into that process by standardizing the steps that you're taking and looking at each individual step of the process. When you're doing it as a step-by-step, I have to onboard my clients. What does that mean? I need to send an engagement letter. I need to collect a deposit. I need to make sure they're informed about what the expectations are of the services we're about to give them. And when you can look at it as onboarding and then tax preparation and then offboarding of the client, you can start seeing that within each of those segments of your process, there are individual steps that need to occur. And so when you start looking at that higher level workflow and the process that you're performing, that makes a huge change. Now, people often ask, how do I do that? Well, we recommend getting out a piece of paper and just start looking at the process that you're performing. Write down every step that you take to produce an actual tax return, every step that you expect your clients to take, every step that you have to take, and start making a sequential order of that workflow. And that is going to start mapping out what your pipeline will eventually produce. Then once you have done that step, you need to look at how you're going to leverage the TaxDome tool. This is a really important process because you have to think about what the feature is that's going to help me perform that step in my workflow. Finally, the last piece is that you need to think about the client communications. The client experience is critical when you're automating because you don't want to lose that personalization. And so by looking at the client experience and layering that over the top of what your process is and making sure that you're instructing your clients and giving them the expectations that you have for them, and also what the results could be if they miss those expectations, you're going to start opening up the communication layers with your clients that is going to transform your client experience, and you're going to have your clients really happy at the end of the process, even if things don't go completely smoothly. So when you're thinking about your pipelines, first step, standardize. Second step, look at the automations and what you can automate. The third step is the client experience. When we're working with our clients in our program, oftentimes they come to us because they have felt uncertain about how to take that standardization process and make it a real live pipeline. They've attempted to do it, and what the mistakes are that I commonly see is that people are trying to solve, again, at that client level issue. They're trying to solve the problem of the client that is unique, the snowflake client, if you will. And while TaxDome, we're going to standardize our workflows and create our pipelines around that, it does not limit you at being able to accommodate unique situations. For example, in our workflows and the templates that we provide in our program, we have all of the clients, business clients, individual clients, and 100% paper clients all in one pipeline. So we have accommodated that by using the TaxDome automations and the conditional logic feature in the pipeline to be able to create a custom experience for each type of client. Now, when you then break that down even further, you have an individual client who has, say, a Schedule C or a Schedule F, and they need to complete different forms in order to be able to complete their tax return. We're looking at how do we gather that information on a unique basis and not necessarily treating that client as a separate workflow or as an exclusionary workflow, because we want to make sure that we are standardizing our work so that we can remain efficient. So when you're thinking about creating your pipelines, don't think about your snowflake clients. Think about the standard process in which you're going to move every client through. And then you need to think about, how do I handle these exceptions? And what are the steps that I might need to customize my client experience using conditional logic in TaxDome?
I think afraid of putting the clients through the first version of the pipeline because they're afraid it might go wrong. I think a lot of delaying of inviting clients to the portal to kick off the automations. I mean, some of it is that, but as far as mistakes, oftentimes, not practicing with the team, not doing the practice, the test features and functions, sometimes not building out the proper folder structure for the clients might create some issues later on. And then the last one's not communicating internally. I highly recommend everyone to use the comments inside of the jobs, inside of the pipelines. That way the team can mention and stay in touch with what's happening in the job, because people tend to operate in silos. And I think communication is huge so that everyone in the team is aware of what's happening with the client that they're taking care of.
All right, so the main thing to keep in mind is that you cannot make any lasting mistakes at this point. You can correct any issues and make improvements at any point as you're setting this up. So take your time, build it out in your head, get that down on paper so you can work on it. At this point, if you have a good idea of what the steps of your process look like, we can get back into the portal and guide you through your first steps. Following along with everything you'll see here is going to be invaluable for you, since it is required for all the additional work we'll do in the following sessions. And in turn, it's the basis for what will save you tons of time and help you keep your business running without a hitch. First things first, let's go make a new pipeline from scratch for right now. Open up the templates section here in this menu on the left, and then open up the pipelines page. We'll show you how you can use templates to save yourself some time in the next session, but first we want you to go through the basics just to learn exactly how everything works. Click here on the Create Pipeline button, and you'll see a page where you can immediately start setting up the stages of your process. Use this button to add more stages and then name them just like you did when breaking down your internal process. Now, I'm going to do the same here to make sure that we're both making progress. Now, if you want to make any changes later on, it is not difficult since you can reorder or remove the stages at any time. Once you have all of them added, name your pipeline and then switch to the Settings tab at the top of the page. This is where you'll get to customize some of those details. The first option here is important for your team. Your team will only have access to the pipelines you create if you add them here. Otherwise, they will not see them and in turn won't be able to work on them. Now, if you're wondering why all your employees don't have access to all of your pipelines by default, well, think about this scenario. If you have several employees and thousands of clients that they're working on, you want to make sure your team's experience is as streamlined and manageable as possible. Now, to achieve that, you would only give them access to the pipelines and the clients that they need to work on. Your bookkeepers might not need to see your accounting pipelines and accounting clients. So only add the appropriate employees here in this field. The next field is purely personal preference. You saw earlier how jobs are listed as cards inside a pipeline stage. Now, this option is letting you select the order you'll see them in. One of the more popular options is to set it to oldest first in order to help you prioritize jobs which haven't progressed very much. However, as I mentioned, you can choose whichever options you prefer here. The job template is something we don't need to spend too much time on right now, since this can be added at any point. Its main purpose is to pre-fill the basic details, such as the priority and the name of the job. These toggles are, once again, personal preference. All job information is visible once you open the jobs, but these toggles let you include some of the details on the job cards. This means you don't even need to open them if it's not something that you commonly check. You can see a quick comparison of how job cards look with all the toggles disabled and with all of them enabled. Customize all of this to your liking. It's entirely up to you. You can enable different toggles for each pipeline, so you are not limited to one combination. Finally, there is the recurrence section here. We won't spend too much time on it now because setting up your basics takes priority at the moment. However, I can briefly clarify what this is for. TaxDome allows you to set up recurring jobs, which the system will create on its own instead of having to do it manually. Payroll and bookkeeping greatly benefit from this since you can set up weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, and other types of schedules. You won't have to worry about missing them. So that's another responsibility TaxDome takes off your shoulders. Now, this covers the basics of what you need to focus on initially. The steps to building out your process as a pipeline are very straightforward, so you should do this as soon as possible. Now, let's take a moment to go over everything important. The goal of TaxDome's workflows is to solve your issues with organization, time management, efficiency, repetitive tasks, and more. All of that can be accomplished by setting up unique processes that we call pipelines. The most important parts of pipelines are the stages, jobs, and tasks, which respectively are the steps of the process, the entries used to track the progress you're making for your clients, and the actions you need to complete to make progress. To set up your own workflows, you first need to break down your own internal processes into all of the individual steps that you need to take. Write them down, list out everything that is done from start to finish. Once you have broken down those processes, start building their skeleton in TaxDome. Create a basic pipeline which has all the general steps as stages. So that's where we're going to wrap things up for this first session. Take your time familiarizing yourself with the terminology and going through those initial steps. Having a strong foundation will help you breeze through the next steps that we will cover in the next part of this webinar series. To give you a small teaser of what we'll cover next time, we will focus on working with templates and setting up the automations within your stages. Those automations are one of the main time savers in TaxDome, so you do not want to miss that next session. Make sure to watch that webinar as soon as you build your basic pipeline structure and you are ready to continue your setup. You can also learn more about everything that's covered in this webinar series in our Help Center and, of course, the TaxDome Academy. The courses there let you learn at your own pace and are one of the best ways to master everything that TaxDome offers. So everybody, that's going to be it for this session. Thank you all for taking the time to watch this webinar, and I will see you very soon in part 2. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.